pleasure of introducing Brad Taylor. He's with Medford Water. He's been the general manager there since July of 2017. Prior to coming to Medford Water, Mr. Taylor spent 15 years at Eugene Water and Electric Board. He graduated from Humboldt State University with a Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Engineering from Arcata, California in 1995. And we should all know where our water comes from. So thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to get out and spend a little time out in the community and talk about what we do at Medford Water. I want to just start with just saying how much of an honor and a privilege it is to have the role that I have to serve the community in the way that we do with something as critical as what water is for our community. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of background. We're going to talk a little bit about the vision for Medford Water, the progress that we've been making towards that vision, and what we're looking ahead towards in the next 10 years. And of course, if you're reading the paper, you saw recently the article that came out talking about the rate increases that are going on as it relates to what it takes to deliver on that vision. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail today as well. So first, let's just start with getting the audience a little engaged in some conversation. So where does our water come from Medford? And there's some people in the audience that shouldn't partake in the questions, but there's yeah. And wow, we have an informed audience. Yes. So we have two sources of supply, Big Butte Springs, and of course out on the Rogue River at our Duff Water Treatment Plant, which is when you go out Table Rock Road and you cross the river, we're right there on the left-hand side as you go out. So we're very fortunate as a community to have those two great water sources here for us and the people that we serve. I want to give a little bit more detail as it relates to those two sources because it relates to our vision and why it is that we're investing right now in infrastructure and why it's important for our community. So Big Butte Springs it's a great source of supply. But one of the things that it has vulnerabilities to is conditions like we're experiencing this year, drought. And that supply, it comes 30 miles down from Big Butte Springs. And Big Butte Springs, if you know where Butte Falls is at, it's right above Butte Falls, really sits on the shoulder of Mount Bluff. So that water comes down to us here in Medford through over 30 miles of pipe. That's large diameter pipe. There's two pipes, 24 inches, 2 feet in diameter. And during the summertime, because of impacts of drought, we can get to the point where we can't fill those two full pipes from the springs. And therefore it limits our ability to access the water that we would normally get from Big Butte Springs. And I put a few numbers up on the slides to help people just sort of understand. So when we're running two full pipes, we're able to bring around 24 million gallons of water down to our system. And if you're struggling with understanding what 24 million gallons is, just think about going to the grocery store and buying a gallon of milk and then buying a whole lot more. Right. So that's one way to put it in perspective. So it's a lot of water, but it's not in the reality. But so because of the limitations of how that system works and how those pipes have to travel all the way down to town, we can't just dial in the flow coming from that source when we don't have enough to fill two full pipes. So that really means we have increments of capability of bringing water down from Big Butte Springs. And so when we go from 24 and we can't fill two pipes and we have to fill pipe and a half, we drop down to around 18 million gallons per day. And then if we have to drop all the way down to one pipe, which we have never had to do, but we can envision that if you had a number of very serious back-to-back years of drought conditions, it would drop that supply all the way down to 12 MGD. And these numbers are important to understand because these are the reasons why we've invested so much in putting energy out of expanding our plant on the Rogue River, the Duff Water Treatment Plant. Because in the summer, we have demands that are around 50, 55 million gallons per day. So you can envision that in order to meet that demand, we rely on both of those sources. But if one of those sources, like Big Butte Springs, has a limitation and we can only bring down 18 million gallons or 12 million gallons, that means everything else has to come from the Duff water treatment plant. And up to this point, the expansion of the Duff project has always been through the lens of thinking that two full pipes are coming down to town. And over the last decade, we've saw multiple conditions where we weren't able to bring two full pipes down to town. And that was the motivating reason of a recognition that the Duff plant had to be expanded as our community was growing. And we couldn't just rely on the combination of the two. The Duff plant would have to be able to potentially do it on its own or mostly on its own. And that was the really, thinking back 5 or 6 years ago, that was the motivating factor that we could see coming that caused us to go into a mode of having to spend a lot of money in order to expand our system to meet the growing needs of our community. I'll just also note that and we'll talk a little bit more about the Duff expansion project, but that project took our Duff water treatment plant from 45 million gallons a day, which is where it was at, up to 65 million gallons a day. So at 45, if we were down to one pipe and added the 12 to it, right, we would be pushing the capacity of the ability to meet the needs of the community in those conditions, and hence why it is the Duff plant needed to expand. And I know that's a lot of numbers to take in at lunch, but hopefully that gives a context to understand some of the motivation behind the projects that we had to do. So who do we serve? Medford, anybody else? Jacksonville? Yeah. So we just don't provide to Medford. We have a regional role. And that regional role includes White City, which is an unincorporated area, but an area that's highly industrial, and therefore water use comes in bigger chunks than it does, from residential. Central Point, Eagle Point, Jacksonville, Talent, and Phoenix, and then we have an emergency connection with Ashland as well. So in the context of thinking about our role, we have to contemplate the planning and all the work that goes into making sure that we're here and that we're available and that we can meet the needs of not only Medford, but the region. So that responsibility, a lot of other communities depend on us for their water supply. And hence, this is just not a Medford vision. It's a regional Rogue Valley vision. All right. So we talked a little bit about what drove the need for investment in our system, but I want to talk a little bit more about how we found ourselves at a crossroads. First off, our water system started over 100 years ago. So this first pipe that was brought down from Big Butte Springs is now over 100 years old. The second pipe coming down from Big Butte Springs is 70 plus years old. We have a Capitol Hill reservoir that's hooked to those pipes coming down from Big Butte Springs, where that complex, some of those reservoirs have been there close to 100 years. These are facilities that just don't last forever. They're like humans. And so the context of planning ahead and understanding that these big facilities have to be replaced at some point in time. And that also related to the Duff water treatment plant. Even though we had a plant that was 45 million gallons per day, it's also been there for close to 70 years. So not only did it need to be expanded, it also needed to be modernized. Population growth, it's a good thing. Our region continues to grow, just not Medford, but our surrounding communities. And we have to be prepared to meet that need and to embrace that need and be prepared to be the engine that goes behind the economics of bringing people here. It takes water, it takes infrastructure in order to support a growing population. And then the other item I mentioned is drought. Uh, Certainly over the last decade, we've had in and out periods of drought. Last year was actually a great year, but the preceding years were not. They were a struggle in terms of adequate water supply. I want to point out that even though we talk about some vulnerabilities as it relates to our water supply, recognize that what we're talking about is shifting from the BBS source to the Rogue River, and we have plenty and or adequate water available to us on the Rogue River that we have water rights to for the region. So even though we talk about a vulnerability of access to water, that really relates to Big Butte Springs. And the infrastructure investment that we've had to make is getting the water into the system from the Duff Water Treatment Plant is different than the gravity pipes that come down from Big Butte Springs. And so we have to, all that water that comes out to Duff, we have to pump that, put energy into it and push that into the system. And we have to push that through straws, to think of it in a simple term. And therefore, not only do you have to expand the water treatment plant, you have to expand the straws so that you can get that water out into the system. So there are other reasons for us to contemplate the drivers for why these projects have urgency to them. As we saw during the Alameda fire, Opie Jane fire, there are vulnerabilities to our infrastructure from natural hazards and or wildfires or things of that nature. And so as we're addressing these infrastructure needs, we are building in resiliency into the system to help us manage those events that can come that can take out a single part of your infrastructure. And the question becomes, if it takes out that single part of your infrastructure, does your system fail? And so water systems, what sits behind a water system is a lot of redundancies. We very rarely build one of something. There are examples of building one of something when you think about maybe a main that serves a cul-de-sac. But when you start to think about how the water comes into the system, where it's stored, how many pump stations there are, that redundancy is part of what we do that sits behind the curtain of the water utility. And then another driving factor or recognition for the community is these investments in our infrastructure, they come in cycles. It's not like you can sit there and incrementally put $10 a day into investing in infrastructure for the community. When a reservoir has to be built, you don't get to build the reservoir for one house. You get to build the reservoir for 200 houses or 1,000 houses. And you have to do that up front before the house is built. So hopefully that helps give an understanding of that these projects that we build are long-term vision projects, and they take foresight and they take a lot of planning and they take money. But those investments that are made often last for years and years into the future. Like we're talking about with these Big Butte spring lines that were built 100 years ago. This community took a $1 million loan out back in 1925 to build that pipeline down from Big Butte Springs. And $1 million back then is a lot of money. And we all sit here today and we're still benefiting from that $1 million investment that was made. And at the time, it seemed like, why are we doing that? Why are we spending that money? And there's example after example of that in the water system. And that's also a good point to recognize that in our governance structure at Medford Water, the only place that our money comes from to do all this is through the rates that we collect from the sale of the water. We're not hooked in through getting money through tax revenue or any other source. It comes strictly from the money that comes from the monthly bills that you all pay for your homes in town. And that's the only place the money comes from. Now, the exception to that can be if we get any federal grant dollars or state grant dollars or money that can come from those outside sources. But it's a much more limited space for that money to come from for water utilities. And certainly in today's climate, it's even more limited in terms of the ability to access that kind of money to bring it into our, our community. All right, I'm at 12:55, so I'm going to have to maybe pick it up a little bit. I could talk. I could probably. I know I could talk to you all day. The question would be, would you want to listen to me all day? So uh, I'm going to skip that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the progress that we've made in the last 5 years, because knowing that we have to spend more would not give you the whole picture of understanding what we've done in a very short period of time as a relatively small organization. We're an organization of 70 people. So all the work that we do, we support it through our employees. And so I like to sort of describe us a little bit like the little train story that we all read when we were younger about, that we're a small engine, but the trick to being successful in that is just to sort of keep plugging away, right? And that's what our organization has done over the last 5 years. We made major improvements out at the Duff Water Treatment Plant. We started with making improvements related to water quality. So the water quality improvement project was completed in the last 5 years, and that project raised the pH of the water that goes into the system. And the reason why that's important is pH has to be at a certain level in order to ensure that the infrastructure doesn't get damaged by that water running through the infrastructure. So the pH helps us improve the longevity of the infrastructure. Think of things like copper, think of things like iron, think all the stuff that our water runs through lasts longer if the pH is dialed at the right spot. It also, from a health perspective, is important because one of the things that metals do when they're in combination with water is they're soluble. So things like lead can be an issue if your pH is not adequately adjusted, because all your fixtures in your homes, if you live in homes that are older, were built with fixtures that may have a lead product or lead soldering in them. So most of that lead sits within people's personal homes and or in the pipes and or fixtures of their homes, not in our system. But what's important for us to raise the pH of our system would be that so that when the water goes through those fixtures from us into your home, it's of a higher pH, which then prevents that lead or those things coming into solution and into water that you end up all consuming and are drinking. So the good news there is we have super high quality water here in Medford, and we've made a further improvement even to make it better in the last 5 years. And we have testing and data that shows the outcomes of those adjustments as well. We've also expanded the water treatment plant, like I mentioned before, from 45 million gallons to 65 million gallons. We built the bigger straw down Table Rock Road. Some of you might have recalled that project of getting caught in some of the construction, and even though some of that was done at night too. But so we brought a 42-inch diameter pipe down Table Rock Road, and again, that's all that's doing is allowing us to get the water from the Rogue River through the Duff Water Treatment Plant and into the system. We've invested in improvements to our SCADA system, which is a term that's used to describe how we operate all the pump stations and all the equipment. And that those tools are tools that require them to be modernized, especially in the age of cybersecurity and cyber threats. So this system was old, it wasn't supported, it had vulnerabilities relative to cyber and security. And so we're in a process of replacing that SCADA system currently, and we've completed all that work at the Duff Water Treatment Plant, Big Butte Springs, and all our control stations, and we've moved out into the distribution system currently. We're about wrapped up with the design of our Capitol Hill Reservoir, which I mentioned earlier, being a complex of reservoirs that is aging and near over 100 years old. That project will be going out to bid here within the next month and a half, and we'll start construction in July. It'll be about a 2-year construction period in order to get the reservoir built. And again, back to the complexity of these things, that the sequencing becomes really important in how we do these projects, because you can't just take something off and be without it for 2 years, right? So we have to build in the infrastructure that even allows us to do the project before we have to do the project. And again, those things take money, they take energy, they take time, and we're going through a period where we're juggling those things right now to and executing on them to get them done. And then we're currently under construction for our Medford Water Operations Center. Our Operations Center will house both the operational side of the organization and the administrative side of the organization. We're bringing those two functions together in our new facility. This makes room for the city to continue to use the facilities that we leave behind to meet the growth that for the needs of their growing service to the community as well. And this new facility for us becomes one of the key elements of our backbone ability to serve our community during a major national disaster or some type of event where we might lose power from the grid. The facility is set up to be self-sufficient, so we're able to function in that and run the crews out of that for a period of over 2 weeks. And over time, we hope to extend that. That's initially our target. And we've seen the vulnerability of the electric grid. We recognize that as a water provider. We're one of the largest customers of electricity within the region. And so we really have to be thoughtful about building our systems in a way that we can have some protection against power failures and things that can impact our ability to get water to you all out in the system. So that's really a list of things that we've accomplished. I've got a whole list of things that we're still planning to accomplish, but I'm going to abbreviate that and move forward to here. So the numbers aren't necessarily important as the profile. So if you just look at this profile and understand that those bars represent individual years expenditures into our capital improvement program. Our capital improvement program is the thing that funds building the Capitol Hill Reservoir, building the Duff plant, right? It's all those infrastructure projects. And that red line in there is showing you what's behind us and what's in front of us. And you can see that we've just come through a very big period of investing in infrastructure, right? We went from $10 million a year built in infrastructure. We went to 18 and then 45 and then 65, 50, and now we're down to 40. And then that is tailing off. And so this is this big investment that we've made for these key projects that are set up to set our community up for success. And it comes in cycles like this because, again, we have to build big things. I would encourage all of you, if you haven't done it, to participate in our tours that we provide to the community, where we take people out and show people the infrastructure that it takes to run a water system. Once you go on that tour, you start to recognize a little bit more about what it takes to get water to everybody's tap within this community. It takes a lot of infrastructure and big infrastructure. Back to the 1 gallon of milk analogy as it relates to 50 million gallons, right? You know how heavy the 1 gallon is. Think of 50 million gallons and think how much energy it takes to move 50 million gallons, what kind of pumps that it takes. So this is big equipment. And our community also has grown to also somewhat take it for granted. It's there 24/7, 365 days a year. You turn on the tap every day, it's there. And that's a good thing. That's the way we want it at the end of the day. But we're at a spot for our organization of recognizing the importance of continuing to make those investments in that system to ensure that we can continue to do that as we move to the future. And with that, that concludes my presentation. And I would also just, I know we have a couple minutes. If there are any random questions and or thoughts from the audience, if somebody wants to ask something, we may have a minute or two that I might be able to respond to something. I don't know, we bring a microphone around, I guess. So yeah. Maybe we only have a minute. Okay.
Thank you for a fascinating presentation. Just out of interest, what's the estimated approximate cost for the Capitol Hill Reservoir?
It's a tough question for me to answer right now because we're going to be putting out to bid shortly, and I know I'm going to be wrong. So we think that we're in the construction cost price of probably around 30 to 35 million.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So as we think about the future, and you look out 10, 20 years from now, and the projections on where population growth might be in this valley, how are we going to deal with, is the Duff plant, obviously you'd have to expand it more, and the water rights, are we okay, or are we going to be really a community that needs to think about how we use water and use less of it?
So I think it's the middle of that question. One thing to put into perspective is when we planned this expansion at the Duff plant to 65 MGD, we actually conceptually built the plan out to 120 MGD. So we have a plan for how we're going to take the Duff plant from where it is now that we've made this investment, moved it to 65 MGD and double it. And we can do that. We have the space to do that. We know the technology. We have, so we have a lot in front of us, but it's also a recognition that this region is a water scarce region, and it's to our benefit to continue to invest in us using our water wisely. And that's really going to be the pathway forward to serve the region in the long term. And so it's really important for us to develop those water efficiency programs, work with our partner cities, and use water more wisely. And that's the best thing that we all can do to help those that come after us.
I just wanted to thank you for your time today. This is really great. Part of my work, I've been up in the Butte Falls area and seen it all up there. And I just can't speak to the room of how important Butte Falls is to our entire region. I think we think of it as Butte Falls and they're up there and we don't go up there. They're working on tourism plans, trying to get more people up there to help with some investment in the community. So they are just so important. That is our water. My question is, the building that you guys are developing next to the airport, is that new administrative building that you spoke on?
That's correct. We're out on Industry Drive off of Vilas. Yep. And just on the point of thinking about how important the broader community is, there's a strong, enduring partnership between us and Butte Falls in terms of what we do up there in support of the community, and as it relates to even the fire risks and some of the things that went on during the OV chain fire. We had landowners up there with bulldozers and equipment, helping keep the fire away from the springs. And I mean, there is a whole community connection and involvement with them, and they're an important group.
I've lived in quite a few places around the country, and Medford's the